What's going on, Imperials? It's Emperor Cubone here. Everyone has their own favorite Pokemon types, and sometimes you just want to pretend to be a gym leader and exclusively use a single element, resulting in a monotyped team. Now, we've already looked at where grass might be the best to use, however, that's just one tentpole of the starter trios, because we also have fire and water to check off. Today we're doing fire, and not just because it's always next in the lineup, but because the flames seem to really stand out from either grass and water. I mean, it does fit perfectly into the triangle of effectiveness, but when looking at the actual regions, it is much easier to find a wild water or grass Pokemon in the early stages without even really trying. But the fire types are generally held back until far later, making it difficult to build a successful team out of them in numerous locations. This holds true for Kanto. Obviously there are fire type starters in every game, but Gen 1 was famously stacked against Charmander, who only had an advantage over one gym, and even struggles against the Ice Elite Four member with all of her water types. So good luck getting past the early game with only one Pokemon, because you can't even find another fire type until Ponyta past Celadon, and then again all the way down at the Pokemon Mansion. It is shocking how hidden one of their headlining types was back in the day. At least fire usually has no special relation to the evil teams, so you should be able to take those on without much issue. But of course, maybe worse, Sinnoh was notorious for its lack of fire. Chimchar is a pretty strong and versatile choice, but even Infernape can only do so much when your only other option is Ponyta for the entire game. Granted, Platinum version did add in a little bit, and you could unlock a few extra options with a GBA cartridge in the second slot, or I guess you could just wait until the post-game to finally fill out your team at Stark Mountain. But seeing as how they're so few and far between, it really just evolves into an Infernape solo run, which can be fun, but is not the point here. I guess we shouldn't be shocked given the makeup of Flint's Fire Elite Four team. Johto is also quite rough since none of the new Gen 2 fire types were even in the Johto half of the map. For some reason they put them all in the Kanto region. But even then you won't find another option until the version-exclusive Growlithe or Vulpix just before the 4th gym. Now that's not the end of the world, because Quilava is pretty great and more than capable of handling the first 3 gyms, mostly thanks to smokescreen tactics, but even so the only other team member that you could pick up is Magmar in the Burned Tower. Or I guess get a Firestone for the Eevee gift, but lacking a full spread by the Elite Four with long stretches of emptiness for the ever-valuable fire leans Johto away from a viable choice for this kind of monotype experience. Also, I'm a little surprised that Hoenn is so bad for fire because grass performed quite well. And yes, I know that Blaziken is pretty amazing as a Pokemon in a playthrough, but you best hope that you can evolve Torchic before that first gym, because the next team member that you'll find isn't until the Fiery Path after Mauville. So quite a while before any backup can help out your starter. However, with Vulpix not being until Mount Pyre, and Houndour exclusively housed in Emerald, it can leave you without a full team in a region famed for its excess of water. So you might have some struggles against the late game when you're weak to the last couple of gyms, as well as either of the evil team's chosen type, and the box art legendaries to boot, with even the remakes having you wait until you're done to open up the Dex Nav. I am not just picking on the early gens here, but they were surprisingly harsh with fire back then. But some newer ones like Alola are also a mixed bag, because outside of picking Litten, the only fire type that you can find on Melemele Island is Growlithe. Kind of. See, they do have the island scan feature where you can encounter certain Pokemon on each day of the week, and some of those are fire types. So if you're cool putting in the work to wait for a Litwick, and maybe another region starter depending on your version, then you could have a decent early team. It just might take you half a week or more. And they won't exactly help much against the water type specialist either. Akala doesn't improve much, with your best bets being Eevee and Oricorio, who can't even become their fire types yet anyway, and you'll have to wait until the volcano to pick up Salandit or Magby. And of course there is Cubone that can evolve into a regional fire type, but just be sure to evolve it before Mallow's grass type trial to help out. There are some late game options as well, but is it really worth waiting all the way until Blush Mountain to get a Houndoom or a Turtonator? And of course there are more island scan starters applicable on the later islands, which means the amount of effort that you're willing to put in is directly proportional to the viability of your team. So you are allowed to take extra steps to get a ton of starters, but I would rather go for something a little easier, like maybe Hisui. Obviously you get the new Ghost type Typhlosion, but also immediately you can see Ponyta around the first area, and EV2 technically, so that can help you out. but I was quite shocked to be able to find Monferno before the second camp. It's not an easy capture, I'll grant you, but it can be done, which will be a huge benefit when you go into the Crimson Mirelands, because there are no new fire types there at all, just access to ones that you could already have from space-time distortions. So I don't know why they wanted to hide away the new Hisui and Growlithe until the game was basically half over, but even with the patience of a saint, you're lucky to scrape together a full team by the end, because unless you count Heatran, there's exactly enough across the entire region for one team. So while it could be fun, there's not a lot of wiggle room here for the fire type in Hisui. Now, I gotta admit, I'm pretty torn on Unova because Tepig can easily get you past the first gym with no other fire types, and then you can immediately find a Pansear in Pinwheel Forest, so that's good. But then you're left with Darumaka, who is right around Berg, and that's great with a decent team in the mid-game, but that's all that you have until Celestial Tower with Litwick on Route 7, which is after the 6th gym. That is way too long of a time to wait, and a lot of other challenges, like Chargestone Cave and the Ground-type Gym Leader. If you're really desperate, you can hope for a Heatmore on Victory Road, or try digging out an over-leveled Volcarona from Relic Castle, but that's still not enough to have a full team, because all of the other returning options are locked away in the post-game. Black and White 2 aren't much better, only giving you a Magby before the 3rd gym, although if you're lucky you could at least get a swarm of Houndour, or try for a Rotom Heat, I suppose. But even with these powerful and exciting prospects, and Simisear, you could still be overwhelmed before you could collect enough to make a difference, snuffing out the flames before they could even really begin. Likewise, the Galar region may be a little better overall, but is still on the borderline, and it all comes down to the wild area. This section of the game really skews the results compared to other games, but all of the fire types are contingent on certain conditions, like that specific section having heavy sunlight at the time, or waiting for a Dynamax raid, but outside of Turtonator, there's really no need to wait, because you can pick up many of the other options on early routes. Like, say, the Isle of Armor having the Salandit and Fletchinder lines, or Route 3 holding the others, including some pretty great unique options like Sizzlipede or Roly-Coly, who can evolve into a fire type before the first gym if necessary, to provide the team with more than just boring pure fire. So even without the wild area, you can get a hardy team before the first gym, but then all the way in the desert area is your next best bet. Or I suppose even the Crown Tundra eventually, and your fire types may have some trouble with Raihan as a dragon and ground trainer at the end, but given that the main threat of the game is a bunch of steel type users, I think it'll balance out. It's just too bad that you have to beat Leon before you can get that free Charmander gift. Now, I actually had a tough time narrowing down the last ones as to which one would be overall better, but I'll talk about Kalos first, and it is surprisingly well suited to support fire-type usage. Once you pick up Fennekin, you can immediately capture a Fletchling, then get a Pansear in Santaloon Forest, and of course grab a Litleo right outside the first gym, which is a Bug-type one, so it'll be no problem for you. And of course, as soon as you get to Lumio City, you can select a Charmander as a second starter. So that's a pretty amazing team to have well before the second gym, and even if it is a Rock-type gym, one of Grant's Pokemon is half Ice-type, so that helps out a lot. And with some of the later gyms being outright weak to Fire, and other trainers loving to have Steel-types on their team, it works out in your favor. It's also worth noting that you can get a Houndour on Route 10, but only an X version. So if you went with the Deathbird, you will miss out on having a Mega Houndoom. That would give you a full team right there, but there are also some serious contenders later on, including some ghostly options in the Lost Hotel. So you can get quite a capable squad, but not a lot of variety if that's your worry, and really the secondary typings don't add a whole lot, other than Delphox having some power over the Team Flare poison types that they use, but that's about it. So as much as I was really rooting for Kalos, I have to admit that Paldea is on top. Firstly, you do have the wonderful Fuecoco as a starter, who was so amazing that it was the first time that I actually picked Fire since Gen 1. So that's a great start. But when you're still in the prologue, you can scoop up a Fletchling and a Houndour, which easily tides you over for either of the first gyms, which I'm pretty sure is the first time ever that they've both been weak to fire. You're usually on the back foot somehow, but here you can tear right through them, especially if you do a bit of exploring to catch a Charcadet past Cortando, or maybe a Litleo over by Artisan. Or if you go a little bit out of your way, you can snag a whole bunch of fire types before you actually have to to go check off any of the story paths, or perhaps a Capsakid that you could evolve into a unique half-grass type to definitely help you beat the water-type gym. And with the Ground Elite Four member being late enough to handle with no problem with possible immunities by then, and no prominent rock trainer in the whole region means that fire pretty much has the run of the table here. And we didn't even mention it last time, but I guess technically any Pokemon could be on your fire team in Scarlet and Violet with terastallizing, which is super cool but also kind of cheating, so I'm not gonna count it here. Also, in Scarlet version, you have the fire-type Tauros to use, and then of course that's not even mentioning Kitakami and the Blueberry Academy that also have even more old fire types to choose. You know, like all of the other starters in the Indigo Disc. So I promise that I am not just picking Paldea because of the sheer volume of the catalog here. I mean, it certainly doesn't hurt, but the region itself is constructed in such a way that for once fire is not immediately walled by super effective trainers. And they also finally allowed fire to be in the wild for a change, and of course you can craftily avoid any low spots until you're ready. So despite its prominence as a starter type, I think Paldea might be the first region to actually give fire the proper respect as a starter type to be on par with the others. Because, as we'll see next time, water has always been the favorite child. Which region most benefits a monotype fire team to you? Are you just a huge fan of firefighting types? Let me know down in the comments. Also be sure to leave a like, share this video, and subscribe so that you too can become an Imperial today. And until next time, stay grounded.